Blessings, BookTube. We're here today to talk about Paradise. Which Paradise? The Paradise by ABDULRAZAK GURNAH, the 94 Booker Prize winner. And Gurnah himself is the winner of the Nobel Prize for Tanzania. Or is he? This is a complicated question. This is a complicated book. Is it paradise? Well, that's not complicated. It is definitely not paradise. There's violence and, child labor and all that good stuff. Nonetheless, I think that we can say that this book asks some good questions about this place today we call Tanzania. And we have to thank Gurnah for that. So I usually don't go too much into the biography of the authors and all of that, but we have to talk a little bit about Gurnah's situation because when a Nobel laureate wins for smaller countries, by which I mean countries less known or less saturated in the web space, even if they speak English. Sometimes these books are asked to represent that country, no matter how multi-ethnic it might be. They're asked to represent that culture or cultures, those ethnicities, those people. There could be millions of them, right? Nigeria is huge. Bangladesh, not a small country either. But Tanzania did not exist at the time that Gurnah lived there. And indeed, Gurnah left Zanzibar, a small island country, after their revolution. And he was about 18. And he became a refugee and then a student of literature, I believe of literature. He became a professor of literature in England. So at the time he left, there was this island country of Zanzibar, and then there was the bigger country of Tanganyika, and the two melded later to become the country today we call Tanzania. So Zanzibar is a small island, and it is culturally distinct from sort of mainland Africa in certain ways. Now, I know there's a lot of people who would love me to shut up about Africa altogether, and I certainly understand and appreciate that. But at least in when I speak about West Africa, I can say what I saw with my own eyes. Now, I'm not naive enough to think that anecdotal evidence is any more or less, I guess, useful than, I don't know, the news. But I don't trust just the news when it comes to Africa because it's always so doom and gloom. So I'm relying quite a bit on hearsay here from my friends from East Africa. But I have not been there and I do not know. Now, by all accounts, despite certainly Islamic participation in African slavery and things of that nature, there was quite a bit of mixing and peaceful and fun and happy mixing, but between Arab, because Gurnah's family is Yemeni, South Asian, Black African peoples, along with tensions, right? So in Zanzibar, the Arab elite, or Gurnah's in the merchant class. So I don't know how elite, but he was a businessman, but I think a smaller businessman, dealt in dates and fish. His family. Anyway. There were definitely tensions, and at nationalism, as nationalism normally does, it elicits, independence and some great things like that, but it can also elicit ethnic tensions. And so at the Zanzibari revolution, there was a lot of violence against people of Arab, South Asian ethnicity. And so Gurnah became a refugee to the United States. So he's asked to represent Tanzania, but he left when that country did not even yet exist. And so this is a common phenomenon with Nobel laureates, right? So sometimes the Nobel laureates that we get from, we only get one or two to represent like China or, massive places. But they might be people that country themselves would not choose. For example, most Tanzanians had no idea who GURNAH was when he won. Because they live abroad, because they studied abroad, because they are, in some cases, persona non grata with the home regime. So keep that in mind when you ask these books to represent a culture, if you would. But I do think it asks some interesting questions in the case of Paradise. So this is not Paradise any more than that neighborhood in Bulayamo's We Need New Names called Paradise is. It's a story of a young boy whose uncle sort of treats him like a servant, and there's a sort of a debt there, and that's why he's sort of traded around and works in different shops, and then is eventually taken on a trading mission up into the interior, where the merchants encounter a lot of violence from the interior people and are robbed and beaten. And so you see this sort of recreation of maybe some of the stuff from the Zanzibar island history that GURNAH saw firsthand. And then, so I think the whole book is really trying to answer a question posed by the last sentence of the book. Spoiler, spoiler, spoiler. So why? And it's totally unexpected. I mean, I didn't expect it. For one thing, the Germans don't play a huge role in the book, but they come through town at the very end of the book, and off he runs after them. So the whole question for me becomes, why would this boy run to be probably a porter, a servant in a servile position with these foreign crazy Germans, and this is a time of war and everything. Why would he run off? What created the conditions for him to throw himself into this, as it turns out, European context, foreign context, escape? And so that's how I think you should read this book. It's one of those books that I do want to reread because I usually foresee the endings. I did not foresee that last sentence, so now I want to go back and look at all those reasons. But even if I don't, I think it adds, this is why spoilers don't bother me personally. To me, it adds to everything that went before. So you think now about, why he wasn't allowed to call his uncle, right? And he was, passed around from place to place and, treated as an object by, for example, his uncle's wife. And so, to me, I can imagine a world in which I'm that boy and I do run off after the Germans. As little sense as that makes in the view of history and in everyone's, post-colonial thinking nowadays, this book makes it make sense. And I think to understand that, you have to really try to keep GURNAH's. I have no idea. I haven't seen interviews of his. I tried to do a little research because he immigrated with a brother, and I want to know if it was a little brother and if he was responsible for him upon emigrating and what became of him. But I couldn't find out. But I think you really have to think about GURNAH's experience of Zanzibar and his emigration to England when you think about this boy's decision in the Book of Paradise. All right, so that's my take on Paradise by ABDULRAZAK GURNAH. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments.